What are some tips on how to stay warm during colder backpacking trips? How do I deal with bugs, especially mosquitoes, while I'm on the trail? And where am I through hiking in Europe next month? All that and more on this week's Q&A. Hey, what's up, and welcome back, hikers, to another week's Q&A on the channel Follow Bigfoot. I'm, of course, Bigfoot. It's been a few weeks since we've had a Q&A. I feel like I've been a little disconnected, been back out on the trail, which is where I feel most comfortable for the last couple weeks, and then we've done some trail videos. Now we're getting back into the mix, doing our Thursday Q&As. If you're not familiar with how things work, just throw whatever question that you have in the comment box below. I'll take the questions that I can answer in next week's Q&A. Don't be shy. Do it right now before you forget. Now, how we start things off here on the Q&A, as many of you know, what is the beer of the week? What am I trying? What am I tasting? We had more comments about beer this last week than any other Q&A. This week's beer is brought to you by Elizabeth. She asked if you like Strawberry Fields from Indeed, which was a beer that we had a few weeks ago. Try Fair State Roselle. It's a hibiscus sour that's from Minnesota. It's so tasty and beautiful when poured out. Thanks for the amazing videos as always. This is the Fair State Roselle. So we'll do the honors here. Give this thing a try. I have enjoyed the sours here. So this is a hibiscus sour, and it definitely looks pretty. So, cheers. That is really tasty. Let's get on to the first question. I was wondering if you know about how long it takes for a sleeping pad to get mold inside from blowing it up manually, and if you feel that it's worth it to get one of those stuff sack style pumps. Thank you. All right, let's talk about the mold in the sleeping pad and how long you might expect for it to start. When I was on the AT, I thought that I could start to sense there was some mold somewhere towards the last 25 or so days while I was on the trail. So maybe 2.5 months. Now, I did have that pad for maybe a good 3 months before I actually started the AT trip. But I think there's so many different variables that can come into play. Obviously, how much moisture is being blown into the pad. There's probably something about temperature that could play a role into it. The pad itself, those kind of things, and I'm sure there's probably a lot more. One thing that I've actually thought about doing, and I actually am going to do when my current NeoAir X-Lite kind of goes kaput, I am going to cut it right open and show everyone on film what it looks like after a couple of years using a NeoAir X-Lite. I have used it in every single one of my trips, except for, I think it was the SHT where I used the short version of the X-Lite. Stay tuned on that in the channel. Now, in terms of these stuff sack pumps, I think that it makes sense for a lot of folks that are going to be at base weights at 15 pounds or above, or maybe even a little bit lower than 15 pounds. There's a lot of value in these things. There's a lot of multifunctionality. Not only does it serve as a pump sack, but it serves as a pack liner for your pack, specific to the NeoAir X-Lite stuff sack, pump sack. It also triples as a seat, so you can actually use your NeoAir X-Lite inside of the stuff sack and make it as basically like an ultralight seat or chair while you're on the trail. I've done a video about this. I'll link it above here if you're interested in how that works. Now, for the hikers out there that are rocking base weights at 12 pounds or below, they're probably not going to find it as valuable, even with the monthly functionality, because they're counting every single ounce, and it's just not going to offset for something that they would want out on the trail. So I think it really depends on what you're trying to achieve, the base weight, but for many people, most people, I think that there is a lot of value with it. I would recommend it. Hey Bigfoot, have you ever considered hiking the Mountain to Sea Trail? I think we had this question about a month ago. It's not something that is going to be high on my priority list. It's a longer trail. I'd have to get quite a lot of time off to hike anything in that range of mileage, which I believe is somewhere above 1,100 miles or right around. The other thing too is only about half of that trail is complete. There's 500 plus miles that you're actually doing road walks. And that's just not something that I enjoy as much. They are attempting to finish that trail, but my understanding is they're only finishing about 15 miles every single year. So they got quite a while before they're probably going to be able to finish that trail and get everything to connect. These next couple questions I'm going to answer in a very similar fashion. First one is, how do you adjust your sleep system through 3 seasons? Do you use a 20-degree quilt with a bag liner and only use the bag liner in summer? Would like your input tips on this subject. The next one is, Any tips on staying warm on colder backpacking trips? I just got back from a trip today and it got down to 28 degrees last night. So starting off, what works for me? The quilt that I'm bringing is really going to depend on the temperatures I see on the trail. If I am bringing around a 20-degree quilt, that will be comfortable for me for somewhere down to about 15 degrees. So about 5 degrees lower than what the actual rating of that bag is or quilt. Now what I do when it gets colder and gets down to whatever the rating of the bag is or goes below the rating of the bag is I start to layer. When I was on the Ozark Trail just a couple weeks ago, I actually saw temperatures going down into the mid-20s and the quilt that I had was rated down to 30. So typically what works well for me, if I'm about 10 degrees above what the rating of my quilt is, I will start to put on a very light layer. Typically, if it's a base layer on the top and the base layer on the bottom. And then as it gets closer to the rating, then I'll start to layer up. If I go below the rating of the bag, that's when I'll typically pull out my down jacket. I'll put my micro fleece hat on, whatever other layers I might have on. But I will layer up as I get closer and closer to the degree rating of my quilt. Now, typically, if I am 15 or 20 degrees above the rating of my quilt, I don't have to wear any extra layers. So why do I do this instead of maybe bringing a quilt that has a lower rating that I'll be more comfortable in and not have to layer? And it really just comes down to weight. I'm going to supplement my layers that I'm going to have with me anyway to help insulate my body heat so that I don't have to carry the extra weight of a quilt. The other reason too is I can also get away with when the temperatures do change and it does get warmer out, I'm still comfortable in that quilt. If I have a lower rating quilt and it gets really warm, it just gets uncomfortable because I get really hot. Most of the time, I don't have to switch out my quilt while I'm on the trail. Now, bag liners are effective. I typically don't use bag liners just because it's extra weight that I feel that I really don't need. And I do a fairly decent job with trying to get clean and stay clean when I get into camp so that I'm not getting my quilt all dirty and nasty. For a lot of folks, it's just as much about that extra layer of insulation as it is keeping their quilt or bag clean. So it's whatever is comfortable for them and what they want to do. My advice for hikers is to understand what your comfort level is in relationship to the rating, the degree of the quilt, and the temperature, the lowest temperature you're going to see out there on the trail. The more you can supplement your layers that you're going to bring already, the lighter that you're going to be able to keep your pack weight, because you're not going to have to bring a lower rating quilt and then have to worry about, depending on the temperatures that you are seeing, you may be able to avoid changing out your quilt or sleeping bag while you're on the trail. Have you thought of doing a thru hike outside of the US, like Europe or Asia? The short answer is yes. This is going to happen. It's happening in June, actually. I am so stoked for this. Many of you know I'm traveling to Germany and I'm meeting up with White Walker and Pacemaker, a couple of hikers that I met on the AT. They thru-hiked the AT the same year as me in 2016. We hiked for about 2.5 weeks. I am meeting up with them in the middle of June, and we are going to hike the Tour du Mont Blanc. So the trail I'm hiking, the TMB, it's about 110 miles. It's one big loop. The nice part from a logistics standpoint is it's going to be really easy to be able to drop us off, pick us up. The Germans are taking care of it. When I get off the trail, which we're going to be on trail for somewhere right around 8, maybe even 9 days, then we're going back to Germany, and I'm going to tour Germany for the last week that I'm there. This is my first time really overseas, and I can't think of a better hike to start off with than the Tour du Mont Blanc. As I failed the 10th this year on the PCT, do you recommend a section for beginners on the AT for practice and prep? I live in Florida, and we know there's zero elevation there. Knowing that you live in Florida, I don't think it's necessary for you to travel way up the AT when you can go right to Georgia. I think Georgia is a great section just to get yourself into the mindset of what life is going to be like out on the trail. You'll look back on Georgia for most AT northbound thru hikers, and they're going to say that Georgia was one of the toughest states. And it's really not. It's just what they remember. It's because they weren't prepared for it, and it took them by surprise. Even doing the approach trail and hiking all the way into mountain crossings, it's about 40 miles or so. I think it's an excellent section. Everything that you want to get out of it, you'll get out of a hike like that. Huge question here. How do you deal with bugs? As you know, the mosquito can be bad here. How do you manage them and hike on? Managing the bugs, first and foremost, highly recommend that you're using permethrin. Not only is that going to keep the ticks at bay, but it is going to help manage some of the bugs. Now, if you're up in the northern woods in Minnesota, you're probably not really going to know the difference if you have permethrin or not because the mosquitoes are just so bad. One way of dealing with the bugs is avoiding the bugs altogether. Never will I go out and attempt a through hike of the Spear Hiking Trail in the middle of the dead summer like I did last year. The mosquitoes were manageable, but the deer flies were absolutely horrendous. There was no way that I could really manage those without having a head net. I love wearing wind pants while I'm on the trail in the middle of the summer. There are lots of different wind pants out there. The current Montbell wind pant that I have, they don't make anymore. They have a newer version. It weighs a little bit more. I haven't tested those things out yet. So wind pants do just a fantastic job with just keeping the bugs away on your lower body. Also, if it's a little chillier, they do a great job with just getting your body heat back up. I use them on the JMT all the time in the mornings when it was chilly out, and then I would just be able to take them off, throw them in my pack during the course of the day. Another nice thing about the wind pants is you don't have to take off your shoes to put them on or take them off. So I did love the versatility of that. And the last thing that I do is I try to avoid making stops for a prolonged period of time where the bugs are really bad. I try to stay on the move because when you're on the move, they're not as bad, especially the mosquitoes. And you're definitely going to use your insect spray, which typically when I'm getting it, I get something that's got about a 30% DEET in it. You don't want or need anything really much higher than 30% DEET. If you go out and get those ones that are 100% DEET, it is going to damage some parts of your gear if you're not careful, like sunglasses, plastics, things like that. Getting to our last question, I'm new to hiking but come with a background in running and triathlon. So far, on the hiking channels, I've not heard of anyone mentioning doing other activities like running to stay fit for hiking. Do you do anything to stay fit other than hike? And how about the hikers you know? Any idea what they do? First things first, I believe that running is not just a great activity to get in shape, but to stay in shape. I think you're going to find you'll be able to get your trail legs faster, and you are going to be more conditioned to what you're going to see out there on the trail. I am a runner. I would love to be able to run somewhere between 4 to 5 days a week. Right now, it's just not happening because a lot of things are happening at work that's taking up a lot of my time. But once I can get through this and balance things out a little bit more, I want to be running at least 3 days a week, if not up to 5. That's what I'm used to. And that's what I was doing back when I was getting ready for the AT, trying to cut some weight, trying to get back in shape. And when I got off the AT, trying to stay in the best shape that I have. I actually ran my best half marathon just after the trail because I got back into running, and that was kind of my transition post-trail back into normal life. One of the fittest hikers that I met on the trail, I met in New York. His name was Bullet, and we ended up hiking the Connecticut State Challenge on the same day, but just not at the same time. He was a tremendous runner. He believed in running. He actually would typically run somewhere between 6 to 10 miles a day. He was young, 22. He actually hiked the AT in around 70 days, but he attributed his fitness from running, how fit that he was, and how well conditioned from that helped him on the trail. I remember him telling me that he thinks to get ready for a hike, all people need to do is just get into running. The more that they can run, the better conditioned that they're going to be, and the better that they're going to be able to handle the trail. That's it. Q&A is done, and in fashion, we always go through some updates on the channel. First update, trail days. It's coming up fast. Be here in a few weeks. I am going to organize a time on Friday, the first big day of trail days, that I am going to get together with anybody that's there at trail days that would like some FaceTime with me, ask some questions, hang out, things like that. I don't have a time yet, but that is coming soon. I'll probably be able to let everyone know here next week on the next week's Q&A. Trail days coverage on the channel. It's going to be very similar to last year. Received a lot of positive feedback last year, what we did and how we covered trail days. So I'll do my best to try to cover as much of the culture piece, and we'll try to get to as many booths as we can. Similar to last year, it's going to be a lot of fun. So we are going to hang out. I'm going to try to meet as many hikers as I can, So more on that as we get a little bit closer to trail days, but man, it's going to be here before we know it. And last year during trail days, you might remember that we donated $1,000 from the channel to the ATC. This year, we are going to be supporting ALDA, the Appalachian Long Distance Hikers Association. They do a lot of great things for our trail. What I'm going to do is not only will I make a large donation to ALDA while I'm at trail days, but I'm going to run a t-shirt campaign that is going to help them raise funds. The funding for ALDA comes from their memberships. We are going to do our best to try to raise, my goal is $2,000 between the campaign that we're going to run and the donations that we get for folks that we can onboard for memberships. All of the money, every single penny that we make from this campaign is going straight to ALDA. So we'll talk about more on that. I'm hoping that this campaign can go live about a week before trail days. And lastly, the Winter Forest State Challenge footage is finally up. It's on Viking's channel. I'm going to link it above here if you haven't had a chance to check it out yet. Well, that's going to put a bow on our Q&A this week. Don't forget to put your question for next week's Q&A in the comment box below. Stay tuned for many more sightings, and remember to always follow Bigfoot.